What we're going to do here today is we're going to look at the federal firearms regulations. It's a white paper that came out. You guys may remember this is dated January 20th of 2017, but that's not when it was actually leaked. There was a leak from Ronald Turk. Ronald Turk is the Associate Deputy Director, Chief Operating Officer of the ATF, and he wrote a paper. It's called a white paper. I'm sure you guys have heard about it. That it's equivalent to, say, like an inter-office memorandum. This was intended for internal use only. It was not intended to be leaked out to the public, which it was. However, there's nothing like earth-shattering in here. It's interesting. The things that I find to be very interesting is that a lot of what he talks about, it's very clear that a change in the administration, the White House, the president, is what prompted a lot of what he wrote here. Again, let's make sure we understand that this is similar to an inter-office memorandum. This is not law. This is not, I won't even say that it's a recommendation of what Ronald Turk is expecting to happen, more so than probably suggestions of things they should probably talk about. But I do feel like he's recommending to a certain degree some of the things in here, and I'll get into it. He starts it out, and again, I'll let you guys see the papers. Actually, this is his cover sheet here that actually covered his memo here. I'm going to call it a memo because again, it's somewhat of an inter-office memo. He's got a summarization, executive summary here, and it reads, and I'll spare you guys the wording on everything, but I'll try to read the pertinent parts. Executive summary reads, ATF is the only federal law enforcement agency with a primary mission that directly involves an amendment to the United States Constitution. I know a lot of us out there probably have issues with the ATF. More of us probably think there should not even be an ATF, but it's refreshing to note that the first sentence in the executive summary of a high-ranking person in the ATF actually references the Constitution and the Second Amendment. So, I mean, they take their role somewhat seriously. They understand that they have a role that is a function that is tied directly to the Second Amendment. Whether or not they take that lightly, I don't know, but they clearly recognize it. So that's a positive thing. Let's definitely look at that as a positive, knowing that they see this. It'd be one thing, I think most of us sometimes feel like, and it seems like the ATF operates without any kind of connection or even knowledge of the Second Amendment. It's like they're completely oblivious of what's taking place in the old written word of the Constitution. After that sentence, he says, thus our actions and policies are appropriately subjected to intense review and scrutiny, which they are, by us, the gun public. He says, and this is what I found to be very important, this would not have happened under the old administration in the last 8 years. This paper serves to provide the new administration, Trump, and the Bureau multiple options to consider and discuss regarding firearms regulations specific to ATF. That's interesting. You got to figure, what did I say? The date was January 20th. When was Trump inaugurated? January 20th. On the day he was inaugurated, this executive summary was put out, this full white paper report. So Ronald Turk, had this waiting unless he got up early that morning and penned this thing really, really quick before noon when Trump took over. My point being, this man here and probably a lot of the folks at ATF, I know we look at these guys as sometimes being the enemy, but maybe we can give these guys a little bit of credit. And when we finish going through this, maybe you'll agree with me, but maybe we can give these guys a little bit of credit as being supporters of the Second Amendment with a job to do. They just have a job to do, and this is what their job is. Because clearly, Ron here realized that at 12 noon on January 20th, there was going to be the potential for some things to happen going forward that would not have happened during the 8 years prior to that. So again, let's give these guys some credit. I'm not going to say they changed their stripes or anything. Maybe they just laid low for a little bit. And let's remember also the ATF doesn't make laws. The ATF more or less enforces laws that are handed down to them and given to them. They do change policies sometimes that we feel like are part of laws, and we'll get a little bit more into that in a little while. But the ATF does not make laws. So these guys are really just enforcing what they're told to enforce. So again, we have to kind of remember that sometimes. He goes on to say, these general thoughts provide potential ways to reduce or modify regulations. I like that. Reduce or modify regulations. It's encouraging to hear somebody from the government that cashes a payroll check from the government saying that they would like to reduce or modify regulations, or let's say, I'd rather them say reduce and modify regulations. But the fact that they're including reducing modifications, or I'm sorry, reducing regulations in there at all, to me is kind of impressive, again, for a government employee to say something like that. Or suggest changes that promote commerce and defend the Second Amendment without significant negative impact on ATF's mission to fight violent firearms crimes and regulate the firearms industry. Yes, I know we're tired of hearing about the ATF, quote, regulating a Second Amendment right that is a fundamental right to all of us. But let's face it, we've got the Second Amendment. There's an ATF out there. There are laws associated with the Second Amendment and the ATF. As responsible gun owners, we're going to follow those laws. So we have to at least give the ATF the credit that they're trying to move something along here that may benefit us. Yes, I understand we should not be regulating firearms, but some things, let's face it, the ATF probably should have a little bit of a handle on, and we'll get more into that a little bit. A lot of people are talking just about suppressors and what Ronald mentioned about suppressors in here, and I'm not going to do just a suppressor talk. I want to skim through a number of these things real quick here. In other words, I don't want to just ignore. There are several things. There are 16 different bullet points to this, and I'll post a link to this on legallyarmedamerica.com. Once we get done here, I'll post this video and I'll post a link where you guys can go read the white paper yourself. But nevertheless, there are 16 points in here. And I don't want to gloss over all of them and just say, these are not important, because they are important. You'll find that there are some things in here that we definitely need to talk about. Number one, for instance, new federal firearms licenses dealing exclusively at gun shows or internet. There's a little bit of wording in here, and there's 3 or 4 paragraphs, 5 actually. So I'm not going to go into all of it. But I will tell you that the ATF is looking at putting together a mechanism to where they can issue a federal firearms license to folks who are just going to sell firearms at gun shows. We're not talking about you and I that are engaging in private gun sales. That's not what they're talking about. Let's not fall into the gun show loophole trap that the left is constantly trying to throw at us. They're specifically talking about guys, let's say for instance, relics, working relics, a working firearm, or let's just say a guy's got a ton of used firearms over there and he just happens to not have an FFL business, a brick and mortar business outside of the gun show. You and I both see this all the time. There's guys that that don't, it's a side business. They don't have a federal firearms license. They don't have a store where they actually sell firearms, but whenever a gun show's in town, they rent a booth, they get their booth, they go over there and they sell firearms. Well, what they're trying to do is the ATF is discussing, and again, this is just a discussion, the potential of issuing these guys FFLs. I think that for the most part, and again, we're talking about law-abiding citizens here. For the most part, not many people are going to have a problem with this. They're going to have to make it. There are so many oddball restrictions to having your FFL that have something to do with your home, how you keep records and where your firearms are and all that good stuff. They're going to have to modify all of that to allow a guy basically to have a portable business. They already do it to a certain degree with the internet, but they're going to have to do something very similar to this if people are going to go out there and have firearms, FFLs rather, just for gun shows. There won't be a set place where things will have to be in your license and everything goes there. I'm curious to see how they tie that address. If you have an FFL, you can receive guns and you can ship guns. So there's going to have to be a little bit of crossover from the way FFLs are done now, and change them a little bit to cover the gun show area. So that's kind of interesting to me. They do note in here that they don't see or haven't heard in much pushback from the general public. I do believe they are polling the general public. If you go to, say, SHOT Show, the NRA shows, and all these a lot of these shows, you see the ATF guys have booths set up over there. So they do try to engage the general public. I'm not going to say that they know exactly what the general public is thinking and saying, but to a certain degree, they have their finger on the pulse. Let's just say that. So again, they're looking at the possibility of issuing FFLs to gun show only participants that may work at a petroleum plant or something like that, and just on the weekends he does gun shows. So that's kind of interesting. We'll see how that goes. There's a little bit, number 2 goes into the armor piercing ammunition. You remember the little bit of a green tip rip that we had a couple of years ago where everybody was in an uproar and you couldn't find green tip ammo because the ATF was talking about pulling it off the shelves and making it illegal because it was armor piercing, so to speak. If you notice, they backed off of that. You'll remember that got a lot of people's attention at first, and then the ATF backed off of it. Well, they backed off of it because of us. People, look, they listen. These guys listen. They didn't try to push anything through or reclassify. I mentioned earlier that the ATF doesn't make laws, but they can reclassify things. When they reclassify things, they can make them fall under one of the laws that are already in existence. So that's where I guess you could say the danger lies of some kind of a rogue person at the ATF reclassifying something, and that's what would have happened with the 5.56 ammo with the green tip. They were going to reclassify it, which would have made it off limits to you and I. They backed off of that. So they're talking about possibly doing some other reclassifications that have to do with that, but they actually, Ronald puts in here that the ATF's classification of green tip ammo, it doesn't appear that that's going to change for you and I. So even if they reclassify it, it doesn't appear they're going to reclassify green tip to make it off limits. So that's a good thing. I mean, I'm encouraged to see that they're not trying to take another something from us. Let's see. Number 3 is pretty interesting to me anyway. I'm not exactly a collector of relics, but I have a couple. 1911s, M1 Garand. I'd like to have more. Unfortunately, there are some issues with the reimportation of American-made firearms, which is very, very stupid. If you will remember, our past president, Barack Obama, he actually passed a law where we could not re-import any American-made firearms. The old Garands that went to Korea during the wars, Vietnam, all of our allies out there that we made firearms for, we manufactured them and we shipped them off to them. Obama passed a law where we could not re-import those firearms. These were standard firearms. They fired and functioned just like every other firearm that we already had here that were just like it. Could have been made on the assembly line right next to it. We couldn't re-import them. You know what that is. That's a gun control issue. That's a controlling of guns, obviously. That's trying to limit the amount of them. I mean, how many thugs do you know out there that are taking an M1 Garand and going out there and shooting up Chicago? It doesn't happen. I've never even heard of a Garand being fired in the city of Chicago. 1911s for also, not many guys that are going to engage in illegal activity. Not many. I'm not saying none. Not many are going to take a pistol that only holds 8 rounds in it or 7 rounds in it. So these guns, by the ATF's own admission, are not a big threat. And they're proposing that these things, or Ronald is, that these firearms should be allowed to come back in the States and be re-imported back here for collectors and whomever else to purchase them and own them, just like any other of the same exact firearm that they might already be doing, that's just not outside the country. Let's see, number 4, also registered. This is a little bit over my head. I'm not going to get into this. It deals with machine guns. I surely don't want to get into the topic of machine guns. And it says machine guns for you guys out there that are going to tell me it's full auto and they're not called machine guns. They actually use the word machine guns in here. But anyway, it goes into what the FFLs and SOTs, it talks about their transferring of machine guns manufactured post-1986. This is something that, again, I don't understand the wording completely. I will encourage you guys to read it. It is number 4. I will draw some attention to it whenever we post this online so you guys can read it yourself. There may be some of you out there that understand this a little bit better than I do. It does sound encouraging, though, to say the least. It sounds like there's a transfer issue out there that might be addressed going forward with full auto or machine guns, as they say. Number 5. Boy, this is one that has gotten a lot of attention over the years. If you remember, who wasn't part of or who didn't at least witness the debate and the arguments and the full-blown fighting that took place concerning the SIG brace or the stabilizing brace? Gosh, we made a video of one. I'm not even sure. Well, I think it was a diamondback pistol that we put one on. We made a video and we kind of explained a little bit. At the time, there were some judgment letters. The ATF puts these judgment letters out. Like if you email them and say, is this legal? They're going to issue you a judgment letter, more of an opinion type letter. It's not law, but it's kind of almost like a live law, if you will, of how they're going to enforce things. And it may make them classify things a different way. But they had some opinion letters out there that basically stated, and there are people out there that are going to argue with me about this, but the ATF admits that it stated this. So I'm not misinterpreting this because the ATF is stating this. Stated that if you used the stabilizing brace as a stock, as opposed to a stabilizing brace, that you were, and I quote, redesigning the brace. Now, we all know that is extremely stupid. You cannot have usable function of anything that automatically is going to redesign it. That does not happen. You cannot redesign something just by how you use it. I made a comment before, if I took a shovel and used it in the wrong way, that doesn't reclassify it as not being a shovel anymore. So again, there's some silliness out there that took place with the ATF on some of their opinion letters. Now, the encouraging thing is, they're writing this, Ronald Turk did in this piece, where he states, and this was actually very interesting to hear that the ATF is kind of, I think, on our side on this. In a determination letter, however, ATF indicated that if the brace was held to the shoulder and used as a stock, such use would constitute a, quote, redesign that would result in classification of the brace/handgun combination as an NFA item. The use would be a redesign and making of a short-barreled rifle. Okay, they know that that's stupid, and so do we. This is what they're saying. ATF has not made another NFA determination where a shooter's use alone was deemed be a redesign of the product firearm resulting in an NFA classification. In other words, they're admitting, look, we've never done this before. We've never made a determination that reclassified something just based on how it was used. So there's kind of like saying, why are we doing it now? Or why did we do it then? So they're suggesting that this is probably not a smart thing. It's not a smart thing. We know this. This ruling has caused confusion. This is their words. This ruling has caused confusion and concern among firearm manufacturers, dealers, and consumers, you and I, about the extent to which unintended use of a product may be a basis for NFA classification. Again, we go back to the standard innocent use of any kind of component should never redesign the actual firearm. I have this firearm, this one that we did the video on. It's registered as a pistol. There is no reason whatsoever that suddenly all the paperwork that I filled out to purchase this pistol and have it as a AR pistol, classified as an AR pistol when I purchased it, that suddenly all that is null and void because I shouldered the SIG brace on it, and suddenly it's an SBR and I'm in violation and I'm a felon. They realize that. Do you realize the trouble in trying to manage something like that? These guys can't like that. I know what some people out there think that the NFA is just out to get us, but I for one do not believe that. I'm sorry, the ATF. I for one don't believe that. I believe the ATF, they're government workers. And again, I'm not trying to slight these guys right here, but they're government workers. Do you know a lot of government workers out there that are looking for more work to do? I mean, honestly, seriously, let's think about this. How many government workers do you know of, and think of them specifically? Do they ever look for more work? Are they happy when they're given more work? I understand when you give them a little bit of authority, it makes them feel big and they puff up and all that. I get that. I mean, some people, there are some police officers that may operate like that. There are some wildlife and fisheries guys that operate like that. Sometimes authority just makes a man a different man. And the ATF, I can't deny that that's probably not the case here. But in general, I really doubt that the ATF looks forward to having their plate piled higher and higher and higher. This is something that I think they feel that goes away if they don't allow something as stupid as shouldering a SIG brace or a stabilizing brace to somehow reclassify a firearm out there. Now they're chasing felons or potential felons out there that they know darn well this guy is not a felon. There's no way I should ruin his life. There's no reason for me to do this. But if they're going to have a determination letter out there that's going to say, hey, this guy's now a potential felon because he shouldered a brace, well, they've got to follow up on that. So the best thing for them to do is write another determination letter to say that this is not an issue. If you shoulder it, you just can't get into the use of it. It's probably one of those, I don't want to see it, I don't want to hear it, I don't want to know about it. Don't tell me you did it. Do it if you want, but don't get caught doing it. And we're going to look the other way. It's probably one of those things. It's going to lighten their load big time. Now they're not going to have that added responsibility to chase down every stupid little call they get of some guy at a gun range, and it's happened, that saw some guy shoulder a SIG brace or a stabilizing brace, and now he's calling the ATF because he's going to save the day. That makes all this go away. I think that, let's see, to mitigate this confusion and concern, ATF could amend the termination letter to remove the language indicating that simple use of a product for a purpose other than intended by the manufacturer without additional proof or redesign may result in reclassification as an NFA weapon. So they're saying that they could amend that determination letter to take that wording out, to say that, okay, we're not going to say that it reclassifies it just based on the use. That's a beautiful thing. I mean, again, I got to go back to these guys look like they're working with us, not against us. I like this guy. I like this guy, Ronald Turk. I may send him a Christmas card. Number 6, reissue a new sporting purpose study. This is kind of cool. This is for you AK guys out there. It starts out, since the sunset of the assault weapons ban in 2004, the use of AR-15s, AK style, and similar rifles, now commonly referred to as modern sporting rifles, has increased exponentially in sports shooting. It goes on to say that with the popularity of AR, AK style rifles, that they are so much more common than they were in even 2011. But years back, there was not, I read a study not long ago of, 15 years ago, how many AR-15s, just AR-15s, not AKs, there were in the country as opposed to today, and it's like millions. It's like a ridiculous number. So the numbers have changed quite a bit. So their point is, Ronald's point is, that these rifles are a lot more known, used, accepted. He even mentions in here that they're used, for hunting. And what he's proposing is that there not be such heavy restrictions on the import services of these style of firearms. Obviously, yeah, there are some international manufacturers out there that would probably like to import some AR-15s, but you and I both know everybody and their brother in the United States right now are making AR-15s. I don't think that we have a shortage of quality AR-15s in this country, although I don't have a problem with more AR-15s coming in from other manufacturers. However, if you remember the little dust up with Kalashnikov a couple of years ago, again, this is a Barack Obama initiated thing, hence the January 20th date of this letter being written. If you remember, Barack Obama got mad about Crimea, got mad at Putin, and he imposed those sanctions, or whatever you want to call it, that would limit or not even allow the import of Soviet-made, actually anybody's made, AK-47s. Now, if you know a little bit about the background of an AK-47, how it's imported to begin with, it's kind of ridiculous how it's imported. The way you and I see an AK-47 and the way we think of an AK-47 whenever we think of one, it's got the whole decked out look, the stock on it, the pistol grip and all that. That's not how they're imported into the country. When they would come in from Sega or whomever else, they looked like a hunting rifle. They had a fixed stock on it. They did not have a pistol grip. It had the old rifle, shotgun type stock on it. The rifle, it looked nothing like it. That was part of is part of the law about how those AKs can be imported into the country. Now, once they're imported, they come to a manufacturer's facility somewhere in the States, and then they can add legally, they can add the stock, the pistol grip, all these other things, the flash hider, everything else that make it what you and I both think of whenever we think of an AK-47. Okay, that was even stopped by Barack Obama because he was mad at Vladimir Putin. What they're saying is these guys should be allowed to import these things. So pretty much reversing something that Obama had put in place. And I think that's a good thing. I mean, Kalashnikov kind of worked around it a little bit by kind of getting their own facility here in the United States and making their own Kalashnikov stateside. That's great. I mean, that's a beautiful thing. Put Americans to work making a Russian-made AK-47 as long as you can keep the quality of that Kalashnikov. That's great. I'm excited about that, and I hope that doesn't change. I hope Kalashnikov continues to make that over here, make the AKs over here, since they invested in that. However, there's a lot of good guns being made internationally. Americans are not the only ones that are making good firearms. And I mean, I'm all about us getting the best of the best over here. And I don't think it hurts America. If anything, I think it helps America because, again, those things are not imported straight from Russia or anywhere else and go straight to your local gun shop or your academy or your Bass Pro Shop. They don't go straight there. They come to a facility in the United States where they actually have to pass through those hands and be stamped with something from America. Everybody that imports has to bring those guns to a facility here, and then they're sent to distributors and dealers after that. So nevertheless, if people are going to be importing these firearms, these new AKs from other countries worldwide, they're still going to result in some jobs being, even if they're not manufactured here, but some jobs are going to be created by these new firearms coming through to the United States. So anyway, that's a great thing. I look forward to that. Again, it's more than anything reversing something that Barack Obama had done, but I think it opens the doors for some other folks out there that may have some quality products that we as Americans may want to see. Let's see. Number 7 is creation of a database of agency rulings. This is pretty much anytime the ATF makes a ruling, they want to have, from what I can understand here, some kind of an electronic database to where all these things can be researched and probably found quicker. From what I could tell, reading some of the meat behind this particular letter, it sounds like the ATF, like probably most and many government agencies out there, are very much behind the times. You know, it's a shame because we see them blow so much money, so much of our money, that we're like, God, these guys are just wasting money. But the sad thing is, they're not blowing it on infrastructure or their own type of IT infrastructure or technology within their own organizations. Granted, I'm sure the big dogs are running around with these really nice Macs or whatever computers, but as far as the average guy working on the front line in these government organizations, they're not getting the tools that they need. And it sounds like this is going to be more of an IT related thing that's going to assist these guys in researching database, or creating a research database that's going to allow them to do a little bit of research a little bit faster. And you know what? It's probably going to benefit us too, because we're going to have access to those records. So my guess is it may be a public database once they get it figured out, and we can go research some of our own rulings from the ATF also. This is not going to be a secret database by any stretch. I was going to put this away. This is the thing everybody's talking about. Number 8. And I'm going to say the word silencers because, for one thing, the man who invented them called them silencers, but it is called a silencer here. So they use the word silencers. I typically use the word suppressor, but if I use both, just, you got to cut me a little bit of slack because that's what they're using. This is interesting. This is very interesting. That's probably why this white paper is getting a lot of attention. Current federal law requires ATF to regulate silencers under the NFA. This requires a federal tax payment of $200 for transfers, ATF approval, and entry of the silencer into a national NFA database. I think a lot of people forget that they're actually, even though when you buy a gun, you fill out your 4473, it doesn't go into a database. Your silencers and suppressors are actually going into a database. You send in and get that tax stamp, you are in a database for life at that point. Again, we just talked about their IT department not being all that great. How quickly can they find that stuff? But nevertheless, you are in a database. In the past several years, opinions about silencers have changed across the United States. Again, I'm so encouraged at the wording the ATF is using, or at least Ronald Turk is using in this letter. I'm very encouraged by it because, again, you and I don't talk to and deal with the ATF guys very often. And to see the type of words that he's using, now he's not using these words thinking that this paper is going to be issued externally to you and I. This was not meant for public eyes. This was meant strictly to be internal, and they were not expecting you and I to be reading this. So the fact that they're using this kind of, I think, friendly wording towards us, the consumer, tells me that they're listening, that they've kind of got their finger on the pulse a little bit. Anyway, going back to the silencers, like they're calling them, they're used to reduce noise at shooting ranges, and applications within the sporting and hunting industry are now well recognized. At present, 42 states generally allow silencers to be used for sporting purposes. The wide acceptance of silencers and corresponding changes in state laws have created substantial demand across the country, and it has. You and I both have seen that. This surge in demand has caused ATF to have a significant backlog on silencer applications. Remember what I told you earlier, that there aren't many government employees who are welcoming new work, welcoming more work, who want to work harder. There are very few that want to work harder. The ATF is clearly one of them. We are hammering these guys with tons of paperwork. Yes, I know you and I both think that it should never take 8 months for us to get approval on our suppressors. I still don't believe that, especially not whenever they cash my check for my suppressors within 2 weeks after I sent the check in. They were very efficient about getting their money from. So clearly they had handled my folder that I sent in. So it tells me that 8 months maybe is a little bit long. However, We have bombarded them, especially with that July 13th deadline last year. Some of the things that they did in terms of changing for trust and stuff like that. We've hammered these guys. We've bombarded them with paperwork, and now they're feeling it. They're seeing it. 8 months might have been probably a good time back then when this actually happened. It's probably longer than that now. They say that this surge in demand, and this is interesting to me, this surge in demand has caused ATF to have a significant backlog on silencer applications. ATF's processing time is now approximately 8 months. ATF has devoted substantial resources in attempts to reduce processing time, spending over, and get this, spending over $1 million annually in just overtime and temporary duty expenses. They're spending $1 million a year in overtime. $1 million a year. I know the government never has a problem blowing and spending our money. And I'm sure the guys have had very good Christmases that are getting this $1 million of overtime. But can you imagine how aggravated their wives and their families are, or their husbands, that they're spending all this time at work, having to just constantly go through this, and it's just simple paperwork. They may be some of the biggest supporters of the Hearing Protection Act, in fact. Anna says, and it's dedicated over 33 additional full-time and contract positions since 2011 to support NFA processing. Despite these efforts, NFA processing times are widely viewed by applicants and the industry as far too long, resulting in numerous complaints to Congress. Hello, you know what? That tells me again, they're listening. They're listening. Congress is, I'm not going to say Congress is listening. Congress doesn't want to take the phone calls either. Congress is probably complaining to the ATF about all this because these stupid, lazy congresspersons that we have up there in Washington are tired of answering the phone. They'd rather be out playing golf, schmoozing, or lobbying. So they're clearly pushing back on the ATF going, guys, is there something y'all can do? So that's why I think the Hearing Protection Act, which I'm sure all of you, and I'm not going to get into the whole signing the petition because we're over 100,000 now, keep signing it, all that kind of stuff, but I'm not going to go all into that. My point is, I think that Congress is going to listen. ATF cannot enforce the Hearing Protection Act. They cannot make it happen. Congress has to. But with the ATF clearly trying to sidestep some of the additional work that they're constantly being bombarded with, and Congress being tired of all of these calls that are hitting them, and in turn they're complaining to the ATF, to me that's encouraging because the two groups that we need to be listening to us are hearing us. So we've got to keep pushing. I think this thing is going to happen, guys. They do go into talk about, which is again is encouraging to me because it sounds like they've done their homework here to support what they're trying to push forward and potentially change and reclassify. They obviously, anybody that they try to say, hey, let's enforce the Hearing Protection Act and make a suppressor a non-NFA item, the first thing they're going to be asked is about criminals. Well, guess what? Ronald here did his homework. He says, on average in the past 10 years, ATF has only recommended 44 defendants a year for prosecution on silencer-related violations. That's a silencer-related violation. That's not saying the silencer was used in a crime, because listen to this. Of those, only approximately 6 of the defendants had prior felony convictions. So clearly, defendants are not the people using silencers or suppressors. Moreover, consistent with this low number of prosecution referrals, silencers are very rarely used in criminal shootings. Given the lack of criminality associated with silencers, it is reasonable to conclude that they should not be viewed as a threat to public safety, necessitating NFA classification, and should be considered for reclassification under the GCA instead, the Gun Control Act. That's a beautiful group of words. I mean, it really is. I mean, this is a guy, Ronald Turk, that he gets it, man. I mean, this guy gets it. He totally gets it. Like I said, he's done his research. He's ready for any of these stupid comments that are going to come. Let's face it, the people with the D behind their name are going to have issues with this. Ronald has done all of his homework already to answer all the stupid questions that he's going to get hit with. Again, it is reasonable to conclude that they should not be viewed as a threat to public safety necessitating NFA classification. Thank you, Ronald. Again, you're getting a Christmas card from me, at least a mug with your name on it. The fact that he's acknowledging all of these things and puts together this in writing like this, clearly this is not all the research that he's done. I bet this man has a mountain of things that he can put out there to help us out and make this argument. So again, let's push this Hearing Protection Act. Ronald, you're doing a beautiful thing, man. Number 9, firearms industry proposal to allow for interstate sale of firearms at gun shows. Excuse me. This is pretty much just the NFA wanting to allow, right now, they want to allow interstate transfers. If a gun show, for instance, I live in Louisiana, if let's say a guy with an FFL and a brick and mortar store wants to go to a gun show right across the Texas state line, a 30-minute drive from here to Orange, Texas. He can't do that right now. He can't go over there and sell firearms. He can go over there and make sales for firearms and take orders, but he cannot transfer those firearms in Texas. Not unless he has a FFL in Texas also, obviously. So what the ATF is trying to do is make it to where those guys, and I'm sure it's an additional license. I mean, let's face it, they're going to probably want a fee for this. But they would at least allow those guys, without having to have a full-blown FFL in another state, which you can't have if you're not living there right now, but they would allow those guys to do that. To me, and they make mention of that somewhere several times in here about improving commerce. You know, again, I have to go back to Ronald here. You know, this guy gets it. He understands from a commerce standpoint that the firearms industry is a business, and people pay their, put food on their table for their families and pay their bills with the money they make from this. And this guy understands that. He's trying to loosen the screws a little bit to where these guys can go out there and make an honest living without having to, fight so hard for it. And you know what it also does is encourages these guys to do everything legally and by the book. I'm not going to say that it's never okay to sell anything illegally against the ATF, but I'm not going to say that everybody does everything the way it's supposed to be. I know people who don't always charge sales tax whenever they're supposed to because they're trying to make that sale. Maybe they need that sale. Maybe it's a big ticket item that they have to sell. I'm not talking about guns. I'm talking about items in general, small, sports stores and stuff like that. Maybe a guy sells a $100 pair of shoes, tax free. Hey, give me $100 in cash and you can take the shoes. That way he sidesteps that tax money. If he can make that sale, convince that guy to make that sale by not charging sales tax, maybe it encourages him to do that. But he's breaking the law. He's not paying taxes on that. If the ATF can support gun owners and gun businesses out there the right way, what it's going to do is it's going to increase their desire to do things the right way all the time and really get on board and do things by the law, and to me, all that does is increase safety and make things better for everybody else out there as far as firearms go. Number 10 is on destructive devices. It sounds like there's a little bit of an issue as far as how destructive devices are classified. That destructive devices as far as ammo and the firearm themselves seem to be kind of thrown in the same category. It looks like they're wanting some clarification on that. I didn't spend a lot of time on that, so we're not going to go over that right now. Same thing for 11 and 12. These are demand letters that they're putting out there. I will let you guys read that again. I'll post a link for this somewhere for you all to take a look at. Number 13, pending ATF regulation regarding FFL records retention. I don't agree with this one. I got to tell you, I don't know what Ron was thinking on this one, but I guess he's got his reason. I got to give Ron a little bit of street credit. He seems to be somewhat on our side. So I'm gonna go with him on this one as far as maybe he knows something I don't know, but. It's basically saying that the ATF right now has a regulation that you're supposed to hold your records, and I don't know what the time frame is. Maybe is it 5 years right now? I think they have a 5-year records retention for FFL records on 4473s that you have to retain those and keep them at your place of business for the ATF to be able to review and access for 5 years, and then you have to destroy them. It looks like the ATF may push for retention of those records for 20 years. To me, that's going to be, for you and I, who cares? I don't care. I mean, if you want to hold my records for 50 years, 100 years, for a lifetime, I don't care. I'm not doing anything with the firearms anyway. Where it's going to cause a burden is the small mom and pop shops out there. Think about it. Think of the little gun stores that you have out there that you've walked into. Some of these guys barely have room for the bulk ammo and the firearms that they have in stock. Can you imagine a successful gun shop that sells a lot of guns that now they have to keep every 4473, what are 4473s, or 2, 3, 4 pages long? Keep every single one of them for 20 years? Can you imagine the backlog? That means that you got to take what everybody collected over the last 5 years and quadruple that. And that's what the gun companies, the mom and pops and everybody has to keep. I don't agree with that. I think there's going to be some pretty significant pushback from the firearms industry on that. I don't think this is going to be something that will pass. Maybe they meet in the middle. 10 years is still a lot. I don't understand that either. It does say here, and again, this is Ron thinking. However, many argue that crime guns are not frequently recovered with times to crimes from purchases over 20 years old. They have a number that they call time to crime. In other words, the time the gun was purchased to the time that it goes to a crime. I want to say that their average of time to crime is around 3 years, that the average gun being used in a crime is within the first 3 years of it being purchased. Those that are using crimes, not every gun obviously, I'm not implying that, but their time to crime is around 3 to 5 years, something like that. So their feeling is that, and still I believe this, the 5-year retention of those records fully covers the time to crime stat that they're trying to do. Obviously they're trying to track it down. Yes, the ATF does not have a database of these firearms. I've actually been a firearm that I sold somebody years ago was used in a crime, and they actually, what they do is the ATF takes that firearm, they go and they research that serial number, if it's still on there, if it hadn't been ground off, but they research that serial number, they track that serial number back to the manufacturer, whoever built the gun. Then that manufacturer says, all right, that serial number was sold to this distributor, and that distributor says, I sold it to this gun shop. They in turn call that gun shop to ask about me in this case. I actually got a call from my gun shop, and they were like, yeah, ATF called here asking about this firearm, blah, blah, blah. So I can say that I personally believe that the ATF does not have a electronic database of any 4473s out there. I really don't. They're relying on the gun shops housing these and having a physical paper copy of them. They're relying on that as their fallback in the event a firearm is used in a crime and they have to track it back down to find out who purchased it. Obviously, in this case, I didn't own the gun anymore. So my time to crime, actually, the gun was probably a year and a half old. So the time to crime was 1.5 years. So it fell well within the 5 years of that retention record. In fact, they've still got the records over there for another couple of years that they'll hold before they destroy them. So anyway, they're acknowledging that's probably not probably not a smart thing. As older firearms possessed by criminals frequently transfer hands several times, and a trace will often not lead to the criminal, or so much time has passed. In other words, these criminals, it's not like they're getting emotionally attached to these firearms, or they're building their own personal collection of guns on a wall or something like that. They're selling and reselling. They're using it in a crime. You've got to admit, they're probably a guy that's using a gun in a crime is probably selling that gun immediately after that, if that gun has been used in that crime, to get it out of his hands, so he doesn't get tied to it for the crime that he's already done, or get caught with the gun in his possession, and it ties him back to the other crime. So these criminals are selling and reselling these firearms. So again, a 20-year retention of records, I don't see that being necessary. And personally, I don't see it happening. I think there's too many people out there. The gun industry has a little bit of a stroke as far as some weight out there that it carries. I don't see them supporting this. Number 14, expanding permissive use of NICS checks by FFL holders. This was actually kind of interesting. One paragraph. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but basically what it is, it's firearms companies or businesses who sell firearms to the public, retail. They're wanting to, without mandating that a new employee fills out a background check to buy a gun, because you can only do a background check when you're purchasing a gun. So you can't go fill out a 4473 and call it in to the ATF, or go in and punch it in online if the person's not buying a gun. Well, what if you have, I want to say a felon, because a felon, this would show up if you did a normal background check for employment. But there are some things that would preclude you from purchasing or having a firearm, or just dealing with firearms as part of your job in something that you had done in the past that won't necessarily trigger a background check if an employment background check is being done. So what's happening is you're potentially hiring somebody that legally cannot be around guns, even though it didn't pop up on their background check when you ran their employment. So what they're trying to do is pass a law where there's, I guess, another type of background check, very similar to a 4473, but it would just be for employment reasons, to see if somebody has anything that triggers within the ATF that tells them, no, this person cannot operate in firearms. Kind of interesting. I didn't realize that there wasn't something like that already, so that's kind of cool. Number 15, Mr. Turk is saying that, this is interesting to me too, there is a need for an ATF confirmed director. I don't know if you're aware of this, but there is no director of the ATF. That's interesting because Ronald's job is associate deputy director, which means that I don't know how many layers and different titles there are that have director tied to it. But if Ronald is an associate deputy director, the director would be the head of the ATF, the man, the head dog. If he's an associate deputy director, that means he's near the top. He's close to the top. Now, there might be an executive associate deputy director or something like that. So maybe some other guys that fill in line a little bit ahead of him. But the thing that's encouraging to me after reading that he's requesting to have a director is that, which he's also chief operating officer, so he's kind of high up there. But if Ronald is requesting a full-time, full-blown director, and he is an associate deputy director, my thinking in terms of this white paper that he wrote that is not meant for public distribution probably is going to carry a lot of weight within the ATF, probably with Congress also, because Ronald is pretty high up there. Ronald is not just above the janitor. Ronald is not a paper pusher or a pencil pusher. Ronald is clearly somebody that has a little bit of stroke over there. Now, how his letter made its way onto the internet where you and I both could read it, I don't know, but I'm glad that it did, because it makes me feel good about the direction of the ATF. It makes me feel good about the mood of the ATF. It makes me feel good about, I think they breathed just as big a sigh of relief at the election of Trump with Obama leaving office as probably we did. Yes, he had this paper ready on January 20th, but my guess is, because so many people thought Hillary Clinton was going to win, my guess is Ronald Turk did not have this letter written on November 9th or November 7th or whatever the day after the election was. I'll guarantee you that. So Ronald had between November and January 20th to write this letter and put it out there knowing that Trump was going to be our new president. So it's encouraging to me to read the wording of this. Again, people, I really encourage you to do it. This is a live video right now. It's going to be up for, you can watch it later on also. But I am going to go have it put up on our website, the link to this, so you can read it yourself. Very interesting, very interesting. And I want to call back to, look at the wording they use. Look at the types of wording that Ronald Turk uses in what was supposed to be an inter-office memorandum that was not meant for you and your eyes and mine. You know, typically when people are putting something out there, the wording they use when they know what their audience is or who their audience is going to be, they will use it, and be polite about it. And you're thinking, yeah, but what are you really saying? What do you really mean by that? We know what he really means by reading this letter, because he didn't intend for us to see this. So the fact that he is using, in my opinion, pro-gun, pro-consumer, pro-constitutional wording in his wording is encouraging to me. It's encouraging to me to have a high-ranking official at the ATF using the same type of wording, the same type of logic, go figure, in a government job, as you and I. So I encourage you to go read it. I hope this video is a little bit helpful. I didn't want to just talk about suppressors and silencers, because to me there was so much more in this white paper that is encouraging to me. I think there's way more good that we, as far as guns go, that we could possibly ever have. I still encourage everybody to go sign the Hearing Protection Act, the repeal the NFA Act, everything else. I will say this, in terms of repealing the NFA, that's my opinion. I'm just giving you my opinion. It's not going to happen. The fact that machine guns are in there, obviously there's a lot of other stuff in there, suppressors, SBRs, short barrel rifles, and machine guns. The fact that some of those other things are in there that are never going to get legalized tells me that, yes, we get their attention with this, but maybe that is something that, and I say we, I'm talking about anybody pro-gun, that includes congressmen that may take up our fight for us. Maybe they give back. Say, you know what? You guys can have the full autos. We're going to take suppressors out of here, and maybe we take SBRs out of here also. Make these things non-NFA. In other words, keep the NFA. I think the NFA is going to be kept. I don't think they're going to disband it in any kind of way. But again, maybe by these people seeing that everybody's attention has been gotten, and everybody's passionate about it, everybody's online about it. You see it everywhere. I see people taking credit for all the petition numbers the way they are. It's not just one person. It's not just. There are so many people. I follow so many people out there. I follow the really famous, popular people on YouTube, Facebook, and and Instagram, everywhere, and they're all doing their part. It's not just one person, but they're passionate about it, and they're getting everybody's attention. They're getting the average Joe like me and you. They're getting our attention. We're sending it to our friends. We're posting on our Facebook pages, our Instagrams. We're posting it everywhere. So we've gotten their attention now with all of this. So I think we're going to have the luxury of having some things pulled out of the NFA, suppressors being the first thing. And you know what? We might get short barrel rifles out of that also. But again, I go back to, I don't think machine guns are going to be something that's going to happen. That's been in place for so long, and there's too big of an argument that they can make, the negatives, the lefties, that they can make, that somebody can walk in and you know what they're going to do? They're going to use school shootings as the example. They're going to say that Joe Blow can go in there and pull this, just with the pull of one trigger, mow down an entire class. You know that's what they're going to say. So again, maybe the thinking there on the NFA, repeal the NFA, is that again, okay, you keep your machine guns, we get suppressors, and we get short barrel rifles. I'm okay with that right now. Quite frankly, I can't afford a machine gun. I know that would probably make them start making new machine guns, but right now you can't find one for under $13,000, and it's junk. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Please subscribe to us. Check out Legally Armed America here on YouTube. We'll post this everywhere we can. Please share the video. Obviously, we're going to try to do more things like this. We do like to get out whenever there's legislation or any kind of proposals that are being made out there. We want the general public to fully understand what's being done. There's a lot of misinformation that's being done or disseminated out there, and our goal is to make sure that you guys are getting at least some of the better information. I mean, we're not the smartest guys in the world, but we do try to dissect these things and read through them and get a little bit of some logic and make some sense out of them and pass that on to you guys. And look, we're open to discussions. If you have any comments, go down to the comment section below, comment, tell us some things. If we've misread something or misspoke, look, we're not perfect. Let us know how we've misspoken, and we'd be happy to repost something later on. But again, we appreciate you guys checking it out, Legally Armed America, and don't forget to check out our website, legallyarmedamerica.com. We're on Twitter, we're on Instagram, all that good stuff too. But I will go and have the link posted where you guys can read this too. I encourage you to read it. It's very interesting, and to me, it's worth the read. Now we can cut this thing off.